Being a heavy metal fan like them was, I imagine, a bit like being a Trump supporter now. It was kind of like, you're so thick, yeah, you're despicable. But the rock bands had the most fun. In those days, there were 4 weekly music papers, and that
Okay.
was NME, Melody Maker, Record Mirror, and Sounds. And I wrote for
Yeah.
Sounds. The reason I started out writing about punk and new wave was because my first review was published in October 1977. I was 19, and the Sex Pistols album was just about to come out. The first Clash album had come out that year. It was the year of punk. And every single little band you never heard of and never would hear of were now punk. 5 years before, they might have been trying to be prog or heavy rock um, but punk was now the thing. Period. I went out because I had always liked Led Zeppelin. I had always liked Thin Lizzy. I didn't see any difference in my mind between Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Elton John, Rod Stewart. This is the early 70s, and these are album artists and all very credible in those days. But by 78, the battle lines are being divided. Rock was old farts and boring and, ugh, how could you? You're a moron. Being a heavy metal fan like them was, I imagine, a bit like being a Trump supporter now. It was kind of like, you're so thick, yeah, you're despicable. But the rock bands had the most fun. You know,
Yeah.
my first trip for Sounds, I'd been sat in the back of a transit van, sitting on equipment, going up to Bradford on a Sunday in 1978, which was like post-apocalyptic. You know, it was nothing. And slept on the floor of the pub the band played it. My next trip was with Thin Lizzy. And I remember after the first show, we all came out and piled into limousines. And then we went off to the most expensive hotel in London where there was a huge party full of famous people and gangsters and drug dealers and snooker players and footballers, you know. And I thought, I'm getting paid exactly the same for writing about some snot-nosed shitters in Bradford and sitting for 6 hours on pile of equipment in the back of a trans.
Mm.
I could be in a limo with Phil Lynott and the boys.
There's no question, is there really?
Well, no. And because it was so unfashionable, doors opened to me because I had no problem with it. I had no problem with it. I thought all the punk ethos was bullshit. I liked the theatre of it. You know, my favourite punk band were the Damned, who were considered, you know, beyond the pale. They weren't awesome like the Pistols or political like the Clash. They were considered sort of two-dimensional, but they were very theatrical. They had this gothic Dracula singer and crazy people in the band, and I like that. I like the more art side as opposed to the come on, the kids must fight, up the kids, down with authority. And because no one was writing about it, opportunities came my way. And then at the beginning of 79, I got offered a job at a publicity company. In those days, independent publicity companies were a really big deal in the music business because the record labels would all have their own press offices. But it meant every band that came through, big or small, black or white, rock or funk, whatever it might be, got dealt with by the same people in the press office. And all they could really do was facilitate. The artist would pay for independent publicists to come in and give them all the love and make them their number one priority. And I worked for a company like that, and they were called Heavy Publicity. And we did UFO, Thin Lizzy, Black Sabbath, Dire Straits, Journey, REO Speedwagon. We also did The Damned, Hawkwind, and a shit ton of other bands you definitely won't have heard of. but it was very much the rock end. And I tell you what, I had the time of my life.
Well, I think we've kept you waiting just about long enough, right? Is he here? Is he here? He's here, he's here. Who am I talking about? Well, a man, really, seriously, who needs no introduction whatsoever. If you don't know who this guy is, I don't know where you've been the last 10 or 15 years, all right? Because me, I've been at home listening to me rock records. There is no better rock guitarist than the man I've got coming on right now.
Because the punk bands are very self-conscious. It was like meeting a young teenage boy who's looking in the mirror and checking his hair, really worried about other people going to say about him. And the rock bands were a few years older, weren't just big in the UK where they got a lot of press but didn't sell a lot of records. It was the opposite. They didn't get great press in the UK, but they sold millions of records all over the world.
From Nicholas Carlson in Sweden, who says he is a thrash fan. Look at that.
Getting the new Fab single together.
What's the new Fab single called?
All the Days.
All the Days.
Which will be out in January, hopefully in February in Europe. And, the album's coming out in February, and it's all so exciting.
Oh, no, I can barely contain myself.
I woke up twice.
And will you be touring, John, or is that too much to ask?
And you'd be in America, you'd be in Japan. And a kind of a gang mentality was then built where it was like us against them. And so back to the point, it wasn't the music, it was the stories. I love music. Music for me is perhaps the highest art form because you don't need to read that language, speak that language. It just seeps into you. Be with these rock stars, and nothing was fake. Nothing was fake. They let it all hang out. And yeah, they wanted to be huge in America. Yeah, they wanted 10 limousines, 2 private jets. Yeah, they wanted to be rich. And they were so funny and had so many stories. But it was the stories. If the punk bands had told the best stories, that's where I would have ended up. You become part of that world, and it's a big world, especially America. You're really embraced, and I didn't want to be the great disruptor. I wanted to be the great, I wanted to evoke how glorious and fucked up and strange but fascinating that world was. I do all kinds of interviews for newspapers. I've been doing this thing for the review section of the Sunday Express for a couple of years. I do the cover story now and again. And it's opera singers, comedians, actors, rock singers too, rock stars too sometimes. Lots of pop stars. They don't have that thing of, oh, he's heavy rock or whatever. They just like my writing. The approach really had been honed by my years on Kerrang, because my approach to Kerrang was I absolutely wasn't an Iron Maiden fan or a Def Leppard fan. I was older than all of Def Leppard. I was the same age as Iron Maiden. I was definitely older than Guns N' Roses and Metallica. So I couldn't see them as, oh, I'm going to meet Iron Maiden. It was like, what's his name again? But my idea was, don't treat it like it's only Iron Maiden. I used to say to myself, treat this like it's the Beatles, which was the band, the omnipotent gods of music in my day. Treat it like it's Elvis or Bob Dylan or Jimi Hendrix or Bowie. Treat them the same way the so-called posh writers would treat their idols. And it worked for me. I never wrote down. I always assumed the reader was as smart as me or smarter, got the same jokes. I didn't really think about the reader. I just wanted to write the best story I could. Didn't matter who I was writing about. So when it came to books, it was the same thing. built slowly. I started with doing a few fan books for very little money, which were really just books on bands for the fans of that band. But once I got to the end of the 90s, I'd really left all that behind and wanted to just be an author. And so, for instance, when I did the official Iron Maiden biography, they couldn't understand why I wanted to go into such depth, do so much research, wanted to speak to so many different people. But by God, they got it when the book was written. And so I just brought that. I needed to satisfy my soul as a writer. If you read Sounds, Enemy, Melody Maker, you were into albums. You knew about music. You were someone you could talk to about Queen, whoever.
Yeah.
So it's changed. That's gone. But the conversation about music will never die. So whatever medium you find yourself in, make the most of it. Don't overthink it, but just whatever you do, just try and make it the best you can. While everyone else is going, oh, that's fine. You're all good. We're done. Let's do one more.